The agenda is sponsored by Newcastle County Government.
This week we're very excited to have Colonel Bloch from the Newcastle County Police Department on our show. It's not often that law enforcement executives actually come onto the agenda, but so many things that they do ensure that you are on the agenda. This week we're going to talk about diversity in his department. We're going to talk about why his numbers are down in regards to bringing officers onto the job and why so many are leaving. Also, we're going to talk about community outreach and mental health. That and so much more on the agenda. Colonel Bloch, thank you for joining us here on the agenda.
My pleasure.
Now, I've heard, if it's just a rumor, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your first interview.
First interview ever.
Ever, not just
Ever.
as Colonel, but in general.
Being recorded, yes.
Okay, great. So we'll.
But I'm not nervous.
We'll make
You set
sure
me at
get a
ease.
copy. Yes, this is just a conversation. Congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So tell people in the county about your new appointment that may not know. Some people don't keep up, unfortunately, with law enforcement and county politics as much as they should, not knowing that they're changed, and this is a big change.
It's a huge change, especially for me. So I'm a 28-year veteran of the department, and I was a captain in our professional development unit, which is where we hire and we have the training academy and whatnot. And the colonel at the time was Colonel Vaughn Bond, and he decided that he was going to retire. Unbeknownst to me, he was moving on to bigger and better things as our public safety director, and at the same time I got promoted to colonel, so I went from captain to colonel, which was a huge feat in itself.
Yes,
And
yes.
a big change.
Congratulations, congratulations. Now, I'm saying congratulations, but what a time in our nation's history.
Absolutely.
To be the top law enforcement officer.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because when I was given the opportunity, there was a lot of thought that went into it. And obviously in the last couple of years, law enforcement, nationwide has really, had a toll taken on them between, COVID, lots of restrictions, obviously some of the national news and protests across the United States. It's taken a huge toll on law enforcement. And I have to tell you that I was at a point where, I could walk away from this job in the position I was in, and I considered it. And I think it was almost by fate that I was in the professional development unit. And in that position, I get to see the people that were being hired, and I got to sit in on their interviews and read their backgrounds. And when you get hired, you write an essay as to why you want to get in law enforcement. Okay. And so in doing that, I was able to see the reasons that these young men and women want to be in law enforcement. And it kind of really made me kind of reflect on my career. And I went back into my file and I was able to get the essay that I wrote when I got hired. This was in 1993. And it was a one-page essay, but one of the last lines in the essay had talked about that I saw a real need for community policing because at the time there was a lot of untrust between the communities and law enforcement. And I really thought there was a need to promote community policing. And when I look back at it and thought back at the time, it was just after Rodney King. Mm-hmm. So, I was kind of dumbfounded because I looked at it and said, okay, it's been 28 years and it's still the same narrative to a degree.
Right.
I think law enforcement's changed a lot in the 28 years I've been on the department. We've really changed a lot, but it kind of reminds you of that there's still changes that can be made. And, and I thought, what better way to end my career than to spend the last 3 years trying to make our department a better department than it is. Yeah. And I think that we're at the top of our game. We always have been. We've always been the head of the curve on most topics. When you talk about things like police reform, a lot of things that people are calling for, we've been doing for years. Community policing is huge right now. we are founded on the whole idea of community policing. It was ingrained in me as a rookie officer and has been throughout my career.
So when we're talking about these big changes, and the national news is basically not giving, not just the national news, but the public, civic organizations, everyone seems to be really hard on police right now. One of the things that's they're very hard about is the officers themselves when it comes to personal conduct and ethics, and the diversity of the departments, and whether or not that diversity reflects the environment in which they are patrolling. And I think Wilmington Police is dealing with that now. So from the county side of things, how are you guys addressing some of that issues?
So I can tell you from very young in my career, I went into the professional development unit back then when I had about 8 years on the department, and I went in to do polygraphs. So I was very ingrained in the hiring practice. And I know that back then and throughout my career, diversity for our department has always been a huge priority when we're hiring folks. So it was something that was second nature to me. I always felt like our department was a very diverse department. When you look at the numbers, we're a little bit lower than probably the national average of numbers in diversity. But as the years went on, a lot of those officers have retired and have left law enforcement. So right now, my concern is for the future and keeping our numbers to where they once were. And it's something that we like ingrain our recruiters in. We do lots of things outside of the box when it comes to recruiting. We've always spent a lot of time on historically black colleges. We've done things like go into gyms, go into barbershops, looking for ways to recruit where maybe historically we didn't do in the past. And we've always done that. And so I'm confident that we'll get there. But I can tell you right now, I mean, it's no secret and it's no surprise to anyone that recruiting is even more difficult than it ever has been.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, people just aren't raising their hands to say that this is the job that they want for a variety of reasons. And before, I know a lot of people say, I just don't want to do that dangerous job. Well, it's more to it than that now. They don't want to be put in positions, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't want to be in positions, placed in positions where their accountability could be in question, their integrity can be in question, even when they may or may not have done something.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between, I think that the people that we have, they're confident in their integrity. What they're afraid of is if they make a mistake. And what I always have to talk to them about is that everybody makes mistakes in any profession, okay? But if you're following the policies and procedures of our department, that we're gonna support you and people are gonna support you. And one of the things that I always like to tell folks is that, we talk about a narrative of law enforcement being questioned, but when you look at our community, and unfortunately law enforcement often gets painted with a broad brush, so something that happens in 3 states away, kind of we feel the repercussions of. And what I tell folks is that this is Newcastle County Police. We're different than other police departments. We always have been. We've always had very professional, outgoing, community-oriented officers. And one of the most recent recruits, he wrote in his essay, is that instead of being talking about the problem, he wanted to be a part of the solution. I think that's so important that you can tell these young folks that you can be part of the solution. You can be part of the change moving forward. And I also have to remind my folks every day.
Let DART do the driving. DART First State provides transportation that is clean, safe, reliable, and affordable. Plan your trip and get real-time bus information with the free DART Transit app. Scan your phone to pay your fare with the free DART Pass app. So what are you waiting for? Try transit today. Visit dartfirststate.com or call 1-800-652-DART.
Auto accident, medical negligence, work injury. Contact Team Tice, your Delaware personal injury lawyers. Leroy Tice in Wilmington, Delaware, serving and supporting the people of Delaware. Call 302-489-2400 That's 302-489-2400. Online at teamtice.com.
This message is brought to you by Newcastle County Government.
Many wonder, what is a variant? A variant is a mutation or a change in the genetic sequence of the virus. Some of our methods of treating COVID-19 become ineffective. If we were to simply get vaccinated, we could decrease the spread and the likelihood that a mutation would form in the first place. Let's get vaccinated.
98% of our community supports us. They support law enforcement, and really it's all about the way you treat others. And you know, and not every department is like that, and I think we're designed a little bit differently than most departments.
Now, you would know more than anyone probably, what is the pulse right now of officers that are transitioning? Because if they took the job 5 years ago, it's not the same landscape as then, right? Of course there's going to be change, but this is dramatic change. A lot of that has to do with morale. A lot of that is affecting, I guess, early retirements and things, and you're talking about the numbers. So right. What is the pulse for the Newcastle County Police?
I think they're concerned about the future. Like I said, I think that most officers, though, feel comfortable in their skin and what they do, and they feel like that as long as they're doing their job the way they were taught to do, they're going to be fine. But there's definitely that uncertainty. You know, when I talked about recruiting, our numbers aren't where they need to be, and it puts an added stress on officers that are working. So they have that added stress. You know, I had a young officer, you know, tell me, she said, you know, I never thought that I would be working in a position where if I made a mistake, I could be arrested. It was never even a thought to her before. Right. And again, I you know, told her what I just told you, is that if you're doing your job the way you're supposed to be doing it and you're following the policies and procedures, the department's going to support you. You know, the Department of Justice is going to support you, because again, if they're doing their job correctly and we're doing our job correctly, everything's going to come out in the end. So I really have to instill that positivity to get that morale back to where it needs to be, because when you talk about recruiting, our best recruiters are the officers that we have with us.
Absolutely.
So it's very important that they are comfortable with their job, and they're promoting the department, and they're promoting their friends and family to get involved in law enforcement. Because sometimes it just takes that one person in law enforcement that befriends you, that you say, you know what, you can do this, and I can help you get there. So it's so important to me right now.
Right. So, you know, it's oftentimes some may say, well, I wish I had that opportunity to speak to a police officer. You guys do, your department does do a tremendous amount of community outreach that sometimes, I guess, isn't publicized as much as it should be.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we're our own worst enemy when it comes to, you know, kind of getting the word out there of who we are, what we do, how we do things in a lot of different aspects. But for instance, we have a Citizens Police Academy. We have a Youth Police Academy. One of the goals that I'm determined to do by this spring is to have a cadet program that we have folks that we hire through I'm also starting an internship program, and that we can transition to a cadet program where we can put these young men and women out into our county parks where they can be seen in the community. They'll be under the age of 21, so they won't be sworn officers, but it's a perfect opportunity where I think it's a win-win, you know, where the county gets visibility, we feel some security in our parks, and we can also use it as a way to recruit the young folks that are the future of our department.
Well, that's great. Before I forget, I don't want to change topics again, but I wanted to talk about mental health. Right?
Okay.
So in dealing now in the times that we are, and that law enforcement has been under the microscope, what has been shown is that a lot of the interactions that law enforcement has, as far as first interactions with individuals during a time of a complaint, can be solved through mental health intervention.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know, it's not taken into an account. And also, you know, these are some of the most hostile times, the most, I guess, fired up, you know what I mean, tough times during an intervention. What are some things that your department is doing to help with that?
I'm glad you asked that, because again, when I talk about us being on the cutting edge, we have a lot of programs. We have one of the first mental health units, I think, anywhere near here, in which we pair a clinical physician with an officer. So when we have complaints for mental health, we have the officer go out with also a clinician so they can try to approach it in a different way. Right now we have 2 full-time officers that are assigned to 2 full-time clinicians where they're working together in the communities. On top of that, what we've already had in place is we have a veterans response team and a crisis intervention team.
Oh, really?
And these are officers that have an extended amount of extra training on top of the regular training that we already have. Veterans response team obviously respond to incidents involving our veterans, and usually what we use is an officer that is a veteran already, so they kind of already see that perspective of things. They get an extra amount of training where they can go out and respond to these complaints. So in addition to that, we do right now, we've already started our de-escalation training, which is training that's really based on how to de-escalate a situation. If you look across the country, it's a buzzword right now in law enforcement. We've already had all of our officers trained in the first round of it, and we're going to follow up in the spring with practical work where we're actually doing live scenarios for incidents involving mental illness and mental health. So our department, again, is always ahead of the curve on doing these things and rolling them out. So the mental health unit, I hope to eventually get to a full-time unit so that we always have mental health professionals working with our law enforcement officers on the street.
So how's it going? I mean, it's there, but is it going? Is it working? Are we getting good reports?
It's going very well. The 2 officers are overwhelmed because we start using them for everything. Because when we look back at a lot of times at a community where we go to the same house 15, 20 times in a 6-month period, we look at it and we usually find that there's a mental health aspect to that, why we keep going back there. So they don't just respond to calls for service that are in progress, they also respond to calls for service where we're looking back at histories and seeing how can we fix this problem in this community, and we're using them for that as well. They also pair up with our Hero Help program, which is a program designed for folks that are experiencing substance abuse issues. And sometimes in some incidents in lieu of arrest, we get them involved in a program where they can follow through the program and not be arrested for that charge. But we also offer the resources for substance abuse to anybody who needs it, not just people who are arrested. So that program, again, is taken off, and we have a TAPS program where we look at communities every week. We go through our crime and our hot spots of where we're used the most, and it's between our heroin help program and our Hero Help program and our behavioral health unit. It seems like they're stealing the show every week because they're so involved in these incidents.
That's awesome. One question I always had, maybe you have the answer to it, maybe you don't, maybe this is Colonel Bloch's time to shake the Etch-a-Sketch and write history, okay?
Okay.
I find it, we all read the news journal from time to time here in the state of Delaware, and I'm seeing so many, I guess, incidents occur, and we're just not getting the feedback from the community as to who was the shooter, who was the person. There's always this reluctance to, I guess, to give police officers the information that's necessary to, I guess, conclude the investigation. Yeah. What can we do to have that trust in the community to make that happen? What would you like to see?
I think you kind of nailed it, is building that trust. And that's why when our officers, I feel like our officers, what I instill in them is that you never miss an opportunity to create a relationship with somebody, okay? We go out to a complaint. When you deal with people in the public, if you deal with them the right way and you treat them with dignity and respect, they're gonna respect you back. So the next time you go to that community, they already know who you are. They know that that interaction with you is gonna be a positive interaction. They're much more apt to provide you with that information than they would if they didn't know you. One of my longer term goals, and something that we still do, is we have a unit that's called the CRT, which is the Community Response Teams. Mm-hmm. And these teams, in my long-term vision, is that we had these teams in all our troubled neighborhoods, but it's kind of like an old school foot patrol where they're assigned to a community.
That's what I was going to ask. Are they getting out of the cars? I mean, you have the beautiful horses, but will you be in the communities doing?
We do. We try to. Unfortunately, depending on, what our numbers look like, sometimes we're just on that treadmill of complaints. We're going from complaint to complaint, and they don't have the time to do that. But every shift that's working right now has 2 officers who are dedicated to doing that. But because there's only 2 of them on each shift, they have to cover multiple neighborhoods. So what I would like to envision, my long-term vision is, and I know they say, you've already done this, but when we had the foot patrols in the communities is where I thought we got the most, we were most effective within those communities. The communities loved it, our officers loved it, but again, it's all about resources, and it all goes back to what we talked about when we started this, is recruitment and retention, and that's my number 1 goal right now, is to get to our numbers to where they need to be, because we have an authorized strength of 415 officers right now. We have only been at 400 for I think a couple weeks, and that was a few years ago. So we struggle to get those numbers to where they need to be. But again, I think that's the most effective way of dealing with it. And that's why it's so important that when we go out and do these special events that I talk about, we do a coat drive, we do a Faith in Blue, we do, fishing with the cops, we do book bag giveaways. We do these things in the communities because we know that, and I go to every one of them, and I make sure that I go and approach everybody and talk to them, because you find that when you take the time to talk to somebody, whether you're wearing this uniform or not, they want to talk to you.
Yes, they do.
It's just a matter of building that trust, and that's something, like I said, our department's always been about, and I like to feel that most of our officers are still like that on a daily basis, that when they go out, it's not what you might see on TV. It's not just about the facts and nothing but the facts. I think they go out and they really try to build bonds with people in the community and build bridges.
What do you think, because it just seems like this constant tone of getting the numbers to where they need to be within your department, and I can tell that is huge right now for you.
It's huge.
And not only that, but getting the right people, right? What are some incentives that you think that officers would want to see or would want or future officers to bring them in, and also to keep some people, right?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it comes down to money, but I think we're fortunate in the fact that we have a county executive that has allowed us to have a class every time that we were ready to put a class on, which hasn't been done in the past. So we're very fortunate in that respect. Right now we're offering a $10,000 signing bonus for anyone. $10,000 signing bonus. Now, you have to complete the police academy, but we're offering that. We were originally offering it to people that were certified in the state of Delaware and certified outside of the state of Delaware as police officers, but we're now offering that to anyone that would apply for our department and be hired and complete the police academy. And that's huge. Again, a lot of times it's a numbers game, and it's a very competitive thing right now. If you look, we were at a point where people were saying, to defund the police, and now we're looking at police departments that are having to pay way more because they're not getting the applicants and they're getting people that are leaving the profession. So I think, like anything else, everything will realign, and it's right now a bump in the road. And I think when we look long term throughout my career, there's been situations where we were looked at negatively, but come 9/11, after 9/11, I can't tell you how many people at a red light would stop and wave and say, hey, thank you for what you do, buy you coffee, so we'll get there again. I'm confident in that. I mean, I think most people realize law enforcement is necessary in any society, and I think it's just a matter of right now, like I said, I call it a bump in the road, but things happen, and usually in long term, there'll be some change, but it'll be for the better, and we'll move on, and we'll get to be back to where we were once again.
I think that's important, and I think it's important that you said it. The other part to that is, what would you say to people who again, are looking in the news and seeing, uses of excessive force that your department has gone through here recently, and how would you address that? Because they could be on the edge. Do I apply? And, I could touch somebody the wrong way.
Again, like what we talked about before, you have an opportunity to get hired and to work with other folks and see that this is not typical of most police departments, and I can guarantee you our police department. I mean, our officers, if they see something like this, they're going to report it because this is not how they want to be seen and nationally. And I like to think that it was more than just videos, because I know a lot of folks say, well, now that the videos are out there, you're seeing all this stuff that happened all along. I don't believe that's necessarily true. And again, I can only speak for our department, but I mean, throughout my career, this is not something that typically happens. So again, there are bad apples in every department, and there are things that happen, spur of the moment, things that happen, people lose their temper, what have you. But I think, you know, most officers, if not all officers, because if I knew that there was any officers out there that shouldn't be there, they wouldn't be there. And I'm confident in my officers and their ability to do their job the right way for the right reasons. Because again, you go back to why they got hired, and I always tell people, if you ever question what you're doing here, take a look at that essay that you wrote when you get hired, because I think you'll surprise yourself if you wanted to come here for the right reasons, and that shouldn't change through your career.
Right, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, how has COVID affected your department internally for your officers?
Well, internally, it's been a challenge. You know, like a lot of other folks out there, you know, our patrol officers had to continue to respond to calls for service. And we were fortunate, and we got a lot of resources early on in the pandemic. Some folks realized you know, they foreshadowed what was going to happen, you know, moving forward. So we were able to provide them a lot of PPE and other equipment so that they would have limited contact with folks. But like anything else, as time goes on, we start to feel more comfortable. People get a little bit laxed. You know, I got vaccinated, I got my booster. We continue to wear masks when we're inside Newcastle County facilities. We continue to promote it. But again, what's very difficult is I think that folks go home, they go to a restaurant, they go out. Everywhere they go, they don't have to wear a mask, and so it's hard to remind them when they come back to work, you have to wear a mask. I encourage vaccinations. We encourage the boosters. You can get them anywhere now, so it's something that we're going to have to unfortunately put up with for a little bit longer until we can get it past this.
So, similar to the nurses, is there a requirement for your officers to be vaccinated?
There's not a requirement. I think coming in the future, you're going to see some kind of a program where we're going to have to either be vaccinated or get tested. The county offers testing almost on a daily basis at different venues throughout the county, but I think you'll be seeing something like that after the first of the year. Well,
that's great. So, again, this is your chance, your interview, your big interview. How would you like to leave it? What message would you like to give to the folks out in the county right now?
Well, I like the folks in Newcastle County to look at us like the heroes that we are. Know that we're there for them. We're there for the community. We're just people. We're no different than they are. You know, we relate to them. We came into this career because we wanted to make a difference. And I encourage the young folks that are thinking about a job in law enforcement to reach out to us, reach out to one of our recruiters. If you see an officer on the street, there's nothing an officer likes more than if they see somebody on the street to have them come up and say, hey, I'm considering a job in law enforcement. They'd be more than happy to talk to you and explain to you what is so great about this career. I've always told folks, 28 years, I still like coming to work every day.
Have you worked any of those days? By that, I mean some jobs you have and you feel like you haven't worked a day. 28 years, how many days would you say you worked? You know,
it's funny, people say to me, now you're chief of the police, you know, you got it easy now. I can tell you, I've never worked harder than I work right now. And I'm gonna do that for the next 3 years because I think I owe that to my department and to the communities that we serve.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on to the agenda. Thank you for supporting the COVID vaccination. And we look forward to seeing you again on the agenda, sir.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
We'd like to thank Colonel Bloch for coming on to the show today. He explained to us why it's hard to recruit so many people and what are the pulse of what's going on in the community and what's going on within his department. It's important that we know, that you know, to make sure that you're on the agenda. Also, how COVID is affecting his department. I didn't know. What are the restrictions? What are some of the things that are going on? And just the overall stress of the officers themselves. We'd like to thank Colonel Bloch for coming on to the show. We understand it's not easy, but we'd like to thank him for making sure that you are on the agenda.